magnificent Oscar winner for you over on ITV4 now. Charlie Sheen stars in Platoon. Here on ITV1, it's news at 10.
Free within hours, the man convicted of the Lockerbie bombing is set to be flown home to Libya tomorrow.
The idea of compassionate release, whereby he may be free to go home to Libya, to his family, is quite difficult to take if he is indeed a guilty man.
News at 10 understands that the Scottish Government has decided to release Abdul Basit al-Megrahi on compassionate grounds, a decision certain to cause outrage in the United States.
Also on the programme. Terror in the heart of Baghdad. A series of bombs kills more than 90 people. Hundreds more are injured. Critical moment for Afghanistan. Security is tight ahead of tomorrow's election. And the darker side of cricket, as an Australian player is targeted by a betting ring.
Good evening. The man convicted of Britain's worst terrorist atrocity, the Lockerbie bombing, is almost certain to be freed from a Scottish prison within hours. Sources are telling News at 10 tonight that Abdul Basit al-Megrahi, who has terminal cancer, will be released on compassionate grounds. He's the only person to be convicted over the deaths of 270 people killed when an American airliner was blown up in December 1988. The news is likely to cause fury in the United States. From Scotland, Juliet Bremner reports.
An act of terrorism that claimed 270 lives more than 20 years ago tonight came to a dramatic climax. The High Court in Scotland had cleared the way for an early release. Then frantic diplomatic activity. Last night, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called for al-Megrahi to be kept in jail. But now we understand the Scottish Justice Minister will free him on compassionate grounds. 57-year-old Abdul Basit al-Megrahi is suffering from terminal prostate cancer. A leading expert has independently confirmed he has a very short time to live. Perhaps just months. The Justice Minister at the centre of this legal and diplomatic storm is Kenny McCaskill. He alone must decide whether al-Megrahi should be released.
Well, officially the decision, of course, has been taken by Kenny McCaskill alone in the Holyrood Parliament, but because of the national and international pressures that are bearing down upon him, it would be difficult to believe that he's not considering the wishes and thoughts of those in Washington, those in London, those in Tripoli.
When al-Megrahi, a father of 5 and former intelligence officer, was convicted at a specially convened court in the Netherlands, it was hoped this would provide closure for relatives. But ever since, doubts have been raised about whether he really was responsible for bringing down Pan Am Flight 103. British relatives remain uncertain about the truth.
The idea of compassionate release, whereby he may be free to go home to Libya, to his family, is quite difficult to take if he is indeed a guilty man. If he is innocent, he should not have been in prison in the first place.
In sharp contrast, relatives in the United States are convinced of his guilt. This letter from 7 senators urged the Scottish Parliament never to release him. But 2 decades on from the night a plane hit a small Scottish town, it's been decided the only man ever convicted of the crime should be allowed to die at home with his family. Juliet Bremner, News at 10, Glasgow.
STV's Mike Edwards is at Greenock Prison where al-Megrahi is being held. But first, James Mates in Washington tonight. James, President Obama didn't want this to happen. Hillary Clinton didn't want this to happen. What will their reaction be?
No great surprise. I think they saw this coming as soon as the appeal was dropped yesterday, but there will be some anger. No word from the White House yet. The State Department say, though, that they have been officially informed of Megrahi's release, and Hillary Clinton will have a statement to make after the official announcement tomorrow. The 24-hour news networks here have been full of this afternoon, many of them quoting ITV News as their source, and families have been appearing on there already expressing their anger, the American families. From the American point of view, most of the victims of Lockerbie were American. It was an American aircraft. They see it as having been an attack on America. Now, they were happy for the Scottish judicial system to deal with the trial and imprisonment of Megrahi, but they don't share the doubts about his guilt that some people have in England, and they do not want to see the pictures they're likely to see tomorrow of Megrahi receiving a hero's welcome back in Libya. That will be sticking in their craw.
All right, James, thank you very much indeed. Let's move to Mike Edwards, who's outside Greenock Prison tonight. Mike, what are your sources telling you about what will happen tomorrow?
Well, the official announcement is expected at 1 o'clock from Kenny McCaskill at a specially convened Scottish Government briefing. Of course, it's emerged tonight, earlier this evening, that he has already made up his mind and has already informed parties and other families and other interested parties about his decision to release al-Megrahi on compassionate grounds. Yesterday, of course, we saw his legal team at the High Court in Edinburgh officially dropping his appeal. At that hearing, we found out quite how ill Megrahi is. He has terminal prostate cancer. Apparently it's a strain of the disease that is not responding to treatment. Kenny McCaskill has met al-Megrahi here in Greenock Jail as part of his process in coming to this decision. He came under criticism for that. He has also spoken to those in Scotland, and Dr. Jim Swire among them, who thinks that Megrahi is innocent. Tomorrow, well, we understand that Kenny McCaskill will make that announcement at 1 o'clock, and as soon as he sits down, al-Megrahi will come out of these gates and go home to Libya to die. All right, Mike Edwards there in Greenock, outside Greenock Prison. Thank you very much indeed.
Terrorists brought 60 minutes of murder and mayhem to Baghdad today, and the worst violence since American troops pulled out of the city. At least 95 people were killed by a series of bomb attacks within an hour of one another. The first blast went off close to the finance ministry in an area usually considered relatively safe. Minutes later, there was a second, much larger explosion outside the foreign ministry near the heavily guarded green zone. They were followed by at least 3 other explosions. Tim Hewitt reports.
Tribal leaders were meeting in a central Baghdad hotel as the attacks began. Good evidence of terrorism, said the speaker. In the street outside, a scene that has been all too familiar here. Wrecked and smouldering cars, plumes of smoke rising on the skyline, and daily life disrupted amid panic. A powerful explosion threw the car up and down, said this motorist. There were at least 6 blasts from bombs hidden in trucks and a barrage of mortar rockets. Dozens of people were killed and hundreds wounded. This is Iraq's foreign ministry. The crater in the street outside, evidence of the ferocity of the attack. The focus was Baghdad's heavily guarded green zone, home to ministries and embassies. The attacks have raised questions about the government's insistence that it can guarantee security. American troops withdrew from city centres here 2 months ago, and there are growing concerns about a new wave of terrorism. Local police say they arrested 2 members of Al-Qaeda after another car bomb was intercepted.
These particular bombings in targeting the foreign ministry and the finance ministry really targeted the entire international community.
The tribal leaders, meanwhile, continued their business amid the smoke and the dust. Tragically, Baghdad is a city now inured to violence. Tim Hewitt, News at 10.
To another, in just a few hours' time, those Afghans willing to risk the threat of violence will begin voting in the country's presidential election. British and American troops have been fighting and dying to try to keep the country secure in the run-up to the poll. But as John Ray reports from Kabul, the menace of Taliban militants means many voters will stay away.
Kabul woke to the sound of gunfire as the Taliban seized a bank in the city centre. 3 fighters were killed, all this close to the presidential palace. Hardly the ideal backdrop to stage an election. There are places it's a wonder people still have faith in democracy. A Soviet-era slum that is home to 60 families. No power, no water, and little hope. Here we meet the Khan family, who fled the Taliban but returned on the government's promise of a better life. It has not worked out like that. It's very hard, says Besmina. Some days I have to choose which children will eat and which will go hungry.
The election is very important and we will definitely vote. We want a president who is kind and will work for us and work for the country.
But in Helmand province, where British troops have fought and died for this election, many polling stations will not open, and the Taliban have threatened anyone who dares vote. While in Kabul, the safest way to patrol the city is with the American military keeping a watchful eye. But on the ground is the Afghan police and army in charge. There are checkpoints everywhere.
The atmosphere here is very tense. The security, as you can see, never tighter. The fact there will be an election tomorrow is a sign of progress. But for many ordinary Afghanis, democracy has promised much, but delivered very little.
At the local market, we find a mixture of cynicism and fear.
The people will feel fear, and they will not come to election to vote, to put the vote.
The people they are not thinking the election is fair, but they are thinking that the presidential is already selected by the foreign countries.
Over the mountains, they follow a path they've used for centuries, but only the second time they've carried ballot boxes for presidential elections. Nothing here is easy, not least the task of delivering democracy to a nation divided. John Ray, News at 10, Kabul.
Well, tomorrow's election in Afghanistan is really a fight between two main contenders. The current leader, Hamid Karzai, is the clear favourite ahead of his rival Abdullah Abdullah.
Hamid Karzai was appointed president of the country's interim government in 2001. 3 years later, he won the country's first presidential election.
His priority, he says, is talks with insurgents, but he's been accused of allowing widespread corruption, slow redevelopment, and has been criticised for his alliance with former militia leaders.
Abdullah Abdullah was foreign minister until Karzai sacked him in 2006. He's pledged to fight corruption and insurgents with the help of international troops, but his campaign could be hurt by his lack of support in the Pashtun-dominated south. Well, let's go over to John Ray in Kabul now. John, less than 6 hours until polls open. So much resting on this.
And it is so much more, Mary, than a contest between rival candidates for the right to run this country. What it is, as well, is a trial of strength between the Taliban and the Western coalition forces here, who have staked so very much on their belief that democracy can triumph over extremism. If tomorrow we have a day that is badly disfigured by violence, if tomorrow the vast majority of Afghanis decide it is simply safer to stay at home, then that is a disaster for the Western strategy here. So much now depends on what happens in the south, in Helmand province. That is the Taliban heartland. It is also Hamid Karzai's Pashtun power base, and it is, of course, where so many British soldiers have died. But tonight we have asked, and nobody can tell us how many polling stations will open tomorrow. Perhaps as few as 50%. And of course, no one can tell us how many Afghans will wake up tomorrow and decide to defy the Taliban and to go out and vote.
All right, John Ray in Kabul, thank you.
Still to come on the programme tonight, why losing both his legs won't stop this soldier aiming for Olympic glory, an uplifting story to end our series on those wounded in action.
Losing a limb is not limiting your life or limiting yourself. There is more out here.
And unearthing the truth, putting names to the remains of soldiers buried in mass World War I graves at Fromelles. Now, two senior Conservative MPs have reignited the Westminster expenses row by calling for massive pay rises. Sir Patrick Cormack and Douglas Hogg said all MPs should be paid six-figure salaries. Well, let's go over to our senior political correspondent, Chris Shipp. Chris.
Mary, the Tory grandee who made these comments admitted tonight it was not the best time in which to make them, and on that he is not wrong. A doubling of MPs' pay does not remotely chime with the national mood, and it left the Tory leader David Cameron having to distance himself from one of his own MPs and say they are his views, not those of my party.
I'm not merely standing because a colleague said to me the other day they wanted a rounded figure as Speaker.
The rounded figure to which Sir Patrick Cormack referred in June when he stood in the election for a new speaker, most people took to mean his physical presence. However, it could now be interpreted as a reference to a different rounded figure, on MPs' pay. In a submission to the inquiry into MPs' expenses, Sir Patrick wrote this: "In order to ensure that members could perform their parliamentary and constituency duties effectively and have, where necessary, a second home, the salary of members would have to be doubled at least, and this might, yet again, be deemed politically unacceptable." At least you might think he got that last bit right. But it's a view on which some fellow Tory party grandees appear to agree. Remember Douglas Hogg? He was the MP who submitted that bill for cleaning his moat. He's written to the same expenses inquiry, saying, "In order not to deter the professional and business classes from coming into the House of Commons, MPs should be paid a salary of around £100,000, together with appropriate expenses." Not surprisingly, both Labour and the Lib Dems spotted a Tory open goal and took a shot.
At a time when people are worried about their jobs, some people are going part-time, MPs cannot be treated any differently from anywhere else.
Well, if Sir Patrick Cormack thinks that doubling MPs' pay will restore the public's confidence in Parliament, frankly, he must be living on planet Zog. When people are finding it difficult to make ends meet, the last thing they want to see is MPs doubling their pay.
And in case you're wondering, a doubling of MP's salary would take it to £130,000. On that, Sir Patrick is right. It is quite some rounded figure. Chris Ship, News at 10, Westminster.
On the eve of the crucial deciding test of the Ashes series, Australia's cricketers find themselves at the centre of a match-fixing investigation. One of their players was approached at the team hotel by a man with links to illegal betting. The player reported the approach, and the sport's governing body, the ICC, has launched an inquiry. Geraint Vincent reports.
In the bright sunlight of the Oval, the Australians have revealed a glimpse of cricket's dark side. One of their players, they say, has been approached by a man with ties to illegal gambling. It's a thorny issue, so that's pretty much all they want to say about it.
As the players and as a team, we did everything that we were supposed to do by the letter of the law, reported to the ICC, and as you're all aware now, it's under ICC investigation.
The approach was made after England's victory in the second test of this Ashes series during a conversation in the bar of the hotel where the Australians were staying. Any contact between bookmakers and players rings alarm bells in cricket. Huge damage was done to the game's image when the then South African captain, Hansie Cronje, admitted taking money from bookies in return for fixing the results of matches. Those days were supposed to have gone.
The anti-corruption unit have done a great job. They seem to have been on top of things for the last 5 or 6 years or so. So it is a bit of a surprise that it's reared its head again. I mean, it sounds like the player concerned acted in exactly the right manner, and that'll make it harder for them to get involved.
Cricket's authorities say the new threat to the sport's integrity comes from the new forms it's taking. Shorter, jazzier, big money competitions being staged in Asia, where the gambling industry is largely unregulated. Cricket has been dogged by betting scandals, and one of the reasons for that is that it's a game which offers so many bets. It's not like boxing, where bookmakers might only offer odds on who the winner is or whether or not there's a knockout. Within one game of cricket, there are dozens of different outcomes and contests, all of which are opportunities for a flutter or a con.
You might get a batsman in a one-day game, they may quote his total runs at, say, over or under 32. Now, if you've said to the batsman, I'm going to pay you money to get under 32, you can get a lot of money on that particular market without it necessarily causing too much in the way of suspicion.
Cricket's first line of defence against corruption is the players themselves. In this case, it seems they behaved entirely properly, playing interested bookies with a straight bat. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
An extraordinary story has emerged from the World Athletics Championships. The new women's 800 metres gold medal winner is facing claims that she is really a he. 18-year-old South African Caster Semenya easily won tonight's race, but the sport's governing body has asked her to take a gender test in the light of claims that she's actually a man. The same race saw a medal for the British team, Jenny Meadows taking the bronze with a new personal best.
Now, all too often we learn of the bravery of British soldiers dying for their country in Afghanistan, but there are other stories of sacrifice that are rarely heard, those of the soldiers who receive life-changing injuries. News at 10 has learned that 55 people have lost limbs in the conflict so far. In our third and final report on soldiers wounded in action, we speak to one of them, whose story is truly inspiring. Neil Connery went to meet Private Derek Derinalagi, who, after losing his legs, has found a new dream of Paralympic gold.
Losing a limb is not limiting your life or limiting yourself. There is more out here. There is more tomorrow than to complain.
Derek Derinalagi is a man on a mission. Despite losing his legs when his army Land Rover was blown up by 2 Taliban anti-tank mines, he lives life to the full. More than 2 years on, Derek recalls the aftermath of the blast.
I could see that my legs were badly shattered, or both. Yeah, and it was just hanging. My left leg was just hanging. And it was the other way around.
At one stage, Derek was pronounced dead, but somehow fought back, waking from a coma 8 days after being flown back to the UK. He didn't know his legs had gone and said to his wife he was getting up to go to the toilet.
She was in tears. She said to me, "You can't go to the toilet because you don't have your legs anymore." I said, "What?" She took a picture of myself. She said to me, "This is you now." I just couldn't talk and I was in silence. I did ask my wife, "You gonna still love me even though that I've lost both of my legs?" I did ask that question. "Will you still love me as before?" And then she looked at me, looked into my eyes and said, "When I stood in church and I said a promise to God that I will love you for better or for worse, that promise will last till death." And I said to her, "This is not the end. This is the beginning."
With his family's support, Derek set about turning despair into hope. The 33-year-old private is now aiming to compete in the 2012 Paralympic Games.
I'm gobsmacked, I'm amazed, and he's a work in progress. Watch this space.
It's very easy to put them on.
Adjusting to life using artificial limbs has taken time and skill.
Straight up. Now I'm taller than you.
Training at the track is now his passion.
Oh, it feels really good. It feels something that has been reborn or rebirth in me, yeah.
Derek is an inspiration, a soldier for whom no battle is too daunting. Can you see yourself on that podium in 2012?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. I'm pretty sure that I'll be there.
And that was Private Derek Derinalagi concluding our series on the soldiers wounded in action.
Football now, and newly promoted Burnley have pulled off a shock Premier League win against Manchester United. They beat the champions 1-0. Robbie Blake, the hero for the home team.
Quite a result that. Elsewhere, Birmingham beat Portsmouth, also by a single goal. Tottenham thrashed Hull 5-1, while Liverpool, no surprise here, were 4-0 winners against Stoke. Our headline tonight is the release of the Lockerbie bomber.
News at 10 understands he's set to be freed on compassionate grounds and put on a plane to Libya tomorrow.
And that news broke too late for the first editions of tomorrow's newspapers. The Guardian says 50,000 A-level students getting their results tomorrow could miss out on a university place. On the same story, The Independent says even students with 2 A's and a B could struggle.
And finally, for 90 years, the bodies of hundreds of World War I soldiers lay beneath the French fields of Fromelles with no hope that they'd ever be identified. But thanks to a painstaking process to recover their remains, they soon could be. Phil Ray Smith went to meet an Englishman hoping to give his great uncle a final burial.
Putting a name to unknown soldiers is not easy. The intricate excavation is just the first part. For the relatives of those who fell in this field next to the village of Fromelles, it is a process well worth the wait.
It's immensely important. Nowadays, soldiers are brought home, unfortunately, more or less every week, and at least the families can can mourn and bury their dead. Myself, my family, right back to my great-grandmother, we've never had a focal point.
Richard Hope Hawkins' great-uncle, Second Lieutenant George Mitchell, had already been wounded in a shell blast when he went over the top in July 1916. He knew he faced certain death, a heroic action in a senseless battle that failed to distract the Germans from the slaughter of the Somme 50 miles away. In a few hours, thousands perished, but their resting place was only identified last year by amateur Australian archaeologists using aerial photographs dating from the time.
The poignancy of some of the finds that are associated with some of these skeletons are quite great, and also the very young ages of some of the soldiers, who are no more than 15 in some cases.
The Germans that killed the soldiers also buried them here, and what struck the forensic archaeologists working on this dig is that it was done in a respectful way. They weren't simply tossed into the trenches, but arranged in an orderly fashion, many of them head to toe, and that was despite the war that continued to rage around them. But the relatives realise it'll be impossible to identify all the remains. Does that bother you?
No, it doesn't, because I know he's going to be buried with his colleagues, and that to me is satisfaction, and it's the final chapter. That's the end.
Thanks to 21st century DNA techniques, soldiers who died nearly 100 years ago will now receive the burial with full military honours given to so many of their comrades before them. Phil Raysmith, News at 10, Northern France.
Fromelles gives up its dead, and that is tonight's News at 10.
Coming next, the weather and the news where you are tonight, but from Mary and from me, good night. And thank you for watching.
Good night.
Warm your and farm spice, you can compare the marketplace. The weather you can never choose. But Sheila's Wiz is all good news.
Hello again. A cold front still sits towards the northwest of the UK as we move through the night, and we're seeing a sort of wave develop along it, bringing us heavier rain and stronger winds concentrated in this shaded area here. Elsewhere, though, towards the southeast, a hot and steamy sort of night with temperatures staying up at 19 Celsius. Now, as we look ahead to tomorrow, that cold front will have swung round, affecting the eastern fringes by the time we reach around lunchtime, but really lost some oomph by that time, so the rain an awful lot lighter. However, behind it, we're going to be seeing some sunny spells and some heavy, blustery showers. In fact, quite a windy picture for everyone, with those mean speeds around 30 miles an hour, but gusting stronger than that. The far southeast could get away with a fairly dry day, but an awful lot cooler than it's been today. Good night. See you tomorrow.
Hello, you're watching Central Tonight in the Midlands. Our top story, the forensic scientists unearthing the past. Historians are hoping this excavation in northern France will help families discover what happened to relatives in the Great War.
I've lived with the fact that my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my own mother never knew what happened to his body.
Good evening. Hundreds of families from the Midlands could soon find out if their relatives are among the bodies of First World War soldiers recovered from a mass grave in northern France. Excavation work is underway at the grave that was discovered at the site of the Battle of Fromelles. Among those who died were soldiers from both the Royal Warwickshire Regiment and Royal Worcestershire Regiment. Becky Johnson reports.
Searching for answers for families who've never known what happened to their loved ones during the First World War. This is a mass grave discovered near the site of the Battle of Fromelles. By the end of the two-day battle in 1916, 1,200 British and Australian troops had lost their lives. Here, up to 300 bodies have been found, and DNA testing is underway to identify them. Among those killed in the battle was George James Mitchell. His family have come here seeking closure.
I've lived with the fact that my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my own mother never knew what happened to his body. And there was no focus, there was nowhere to come and pay our respects.
500 of those who lost their lives here belonged to the British 61st South Midlands Division, many of whom were untried volunteers from Warwickshire and Worcestershire.
the families have been dispersed over the years, and we are trying to find the next of kin or relatives of the soldiers who may be in the burial graves. And to that effect, we're looking to get as many people as we possibly can to get us in touch with us so that we can bring them in, find out about them, hopefully, ultimately, get them linked in with their relatives who might be buried here.
When the work here is complete, the soldiers' remains will be laid to rest with full military honours. Heroes whose families will finally be able to say goodbye. Becky Johnson for Central Tonight.
The Union flag is being flown at half-mast in Coventry Council offices for 24 hours to honour a soldier from the city who was killed in Afghanistan. As we reported yesterday, Lance Corporal James Fullerton died in an explosion in Helmand province on Sunday. His family and fiancée said he'd been proud to serve his Queen and country and that his death had left a void in their lives. The parents of a man killed in a quad biking accident received the devastating phone call telling them the news when they were driving home along the motorway. Harish Nila Shah's son, Dhiren, who was 22, died while holidaying with friends in Corfu. He wasn't wearing a helmet at the time of the crash. His parents from Leicester hope it'll be a warning to others. Peter Byrne reports.
He has so much going for him.
A special tribute to a much-loved son. A montage of photos put together by Dhiren Shah's friends. One of those friends had to phone Dhiren's parents with news of his death. A phone call they received on the M1 as they drove home from a family party in London.
Dhiren's friend phoned on a mobile, and that's how we knew.
So you heard it while you were travelling?
While we were travelling.
It must have been a dreadful shock for you.
It's a tragic shock. Since the phone call, our lives has been devastated.
He was very generous, kind and clever, and he's always looking after the family.
Dhiren from Stonygate in Leicester was on a week-long break with his friends in Corfu, his first trip abroad without his parents. This photo was taken just 2 hours before he hired a quad bike and crashed into a wall. He wasn't wearing a helmet.
Young people, very careful with the quad bike. It's more accident prone than you think, and wear a helmet, that's important. It could have saved Dhiren's life, we don't know, but he's gone. But we don't want another life to be lost unnecessarily.
Dhiren, who was 22, was studying to become an optician. His mother showed me the work he'd been doing towards an exam in September. She still can't believe she won't see him again.
To take it inside that he's not coming back is very tragic, because we haven't seen the accident, so in our mind that he's going to come back.
Another round of postal strikes have been affecting areas in the Midlands today. Staff at post offices in Stoke, Coventry and this one in Birmingham went on strike for 24 hours just after midnight this morning. Members of the Communication Workers Union say Royal Mail has cut pay and jobs against a deal signed 2 years ago. The company has denied the claims. Police have made an urgent appeal for help in finding a 79-year-old man with dementia who's been missing for more than 24 hours. Gordon Beard was last seen at his home in Loggerheads in Staffordshire yesterday morning. Police helicopter and dog teams have been brought in to help with the search. Camera retailer Jessop's has announced another fall in sales. The Leicester-based chain, which has 211 stores across the country, reported a fall in sales of 4.7% for the 12 weeks to August the 16th. A Midlands-based charity is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Islamic Relief was formed in Birmingham in 1984. The agency has been involved in distributing aid in some of the world's worst disaster-hit regions, including Gaza, Kashmir and Bangladesh. Today, a special event was held in London, showing photos of Islamic Relief's work across the world. Football now, and in the Premier League, two of our teams have been in action this evening. Bad news, I'm afraid, for Stoke City. They lost 4-0 to Liverpool, but better news at St Andrews. Birmingham City beat Portsmouth 1-0. Let's take a look at the weather forecast now. Here's Lucy Kite.
The weather's rubbish, baby, so it's time to get some sun. Put ice cubes in your cocktail and get sand up your bum.
Hello, well I hope you enjoyed the little taste of summer today. It was a fleeting visit, I'm afraid. This is what's on the cards for tomorrow, but a largely dry night tonight and staying warm too. We do have a weather front moving in, so the cloud will build to the west of the region and we're likely to see some rain, and that sets the scene for tomorrow. We've got this rain band that's steadily making its way eastwards across the region. It will fragment as it does so and turn showery, so an improving picture in the afternoon, a case of sunshine and showers, and highs of 21 degrees Celsius, so feeling a little bit fresher than today. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.
ITV Regional Weather with BeMyBaby.com.
A reasonable outlook on the weather front. Well, that's it from Central News. We're back within GMT. Don't forget, Central tonight at 6 p.m. every weekday evening. For now, though, a very good night. Good night.